Where I was today, I had the Curtis Bay. Talk about an area that's really hurting. When's the last time you guys were in Curtis Bay?
I got down there about 8 months ago because W.R. Grace has a.
Are they down there?
Down
Okay,
there.
okay.
And I was down there trying to help them on some energy issues.
Okay.
Because it's just Curtis Bay is just. It's like something in the past.
It is something. It looks like a third world country. I got to tell you now. You know, I mean, my mother's people were all from Locust Point, and so she had family in South Baltimore over the bridge, but it was never like that. But Curtis Bay.
Locust Point is one of the really bright spots of Baltimore.
Oh yeah, it is. I think it's like a hidden gem.
It really is. It's clean. It's safe.
Well, you're not drive-by shooting anybody because it ends at the fort. And so you're not cutting through Locust Point on your way to anywhere, you know? It's a very solid community. It's very clean, very well.
Does your family's roots go back to your parents in Locust Point?
Yes. Yeah. That funeral home right on Fort Avenue, Connolly's, everybody was buried. Like you walk right into the viewing and everybody's there. And the penny candy store my grandmother lived on Hubbard Street. So the fort was my playground.
Well, John Sherholtz, who's a close friend of Bob and mine. John Sherholtz, who's now 78.
He's the one that was the GM of Atlanta Braves, Sherholtz?
He grew up in Locust Point.
Did he really?
I'll tell you where he grew up. He grew up off of on Clementine.
Oh, sure.
So he was right, and Clementine's off Fort, isn't it?
Yes,
right
yes,
there.
it is. It was a great neighborhood.
He was born over near Patterson Park, and then family moved down to Locust Point. So Elizabeth, what year are you now?
I'm a junior.
Junior, terrific. So this spring, go see some schools, that kind of plan?
Yeah. We have actually our first college admissions thing, or not college admissions, but college counseling thing next week. I took the SAT tomorrow. So yeah, Jesus, yeah. that's my internal reaction. You'll be fine.
Pacific to the east and bringing a lot of rain with it here. Some average plus rainfall total to kick off December.
Drop off tomorrow.
International graduate because of that
Saturday high 45, rain showers or
That's the American population. Because of the issues. That was last couple of years. Yeah.
All the schools in the system that should not have that issue.
No, I know.
I mean, we do know that given the high academic standards, that you have to.
Stand by, guys. That's on. Here we go. Showtime.
Download the WCBM 680 mobile phone app for your smartphone at WCBM.com. The views and opinions you hear on Talk Radio 680 WCBM at WCBM.com are not necessarily those of the owners, management, employers, and advertisers of WCBM. But they should be.
The Bob Paff Show is brought to you by Bob Paff.
You guys see the on air. Here we go.
This is Talk Radio 680 WCBM and worldwide at WCBM.com. It's time now for the Bob Paff Show.
Hey folks, it's Bob Paff here. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's great to be with you. The time flies by, and I tell you what, I've got two very distinguished gentlemen in the studio with me. And guys, if I read your accomplishments here, this would take up the whole show. But I'm thrilled and honored to have Mike, if I can say, my old friend Mike Gill, who is the Secretary of Commerce. Mike was appointed by Larry Hogan in January of 2015 to lead the Department of Commerce in the state of Maryland. Mike's got a list of accomplishments here. We'll go over a few of those. And then we're honored to have the Chancellor of the University of Maryland, Bob Correttin, here with us. And Bob was formerly the president of Towson University. And Bob, you were at UMass for a number of years as well, right?
Yes, it was. I was up there for almost 5 years.
5 years there, and you've been the chancellor at the University of Maryland since 2015, right? All right, folks. So we've got these two gentlemen here. They're happy to take your calls. Let me give you the phone number really quick. If you're local, you can call us at 410-922-6680. If you're out of the area, because I know we've got friends joining us from the West Coast out there in California, we're always thinking about you folks and what's going on in Thousand Oaks and the fires, and our prayers and our love is going out there with you. But you can call us at 800-922-6680 as well. I want to thank our sponsors, Cipriana and Roland Park. Mike, it's great having the Secretary of Commerce here because, Mike, we're all about small business, and we're all about catching and finding people that are doing things well and really trying to turn things around in the state of, in the city of Baltimore in particular. Mike, I live in the city. Bob, I live in the city. I grew up in the city. I'm worried about the city, guys. I got to tell you, there are a lot of struggles that we're having. I was just sharing with these guys that I was down in Curtis Bay today, which I'll tell you, it looked like a third world country down there to me, and it brought a tear to my eye. I happened to be down there, and it really broke my heart. So anyway, I want to jump right in here. And Mike, if we can throw it to you, because I want to hear, now we've got 4 more years of Larry Hogan. Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, is only the 3rd Republican governor in the state of Maryland, and only, I think, the first to be reelected since 1954. Is that about right, Mike? 1950s, I think.
1954. That's right.
Yeah, 1954. And so, and he's doing a terrific job. I hope we'll get some folks that are calling in. But Mike, can you share with us a little bit? We don't have the governor here. I'd love to have him at some point. But as his commerce secretary, Mike, talk about the business environment and the climate. What kind of things does the governor, what kind of things are you were talking to Bob about linking education and commerce. What kind of things can the citizens of Maryland expect from this governor, from this commerce department going forward?
Yeah, Bob, let me do this. Let me try as best I can to be succinct, because it's a big part of the story. The story in Maryland the last 4 years. I'll back up and I'll tell a story, and then we'll come forward.
Okay.
When I sat down with the governor 4 years ago to talk about this opportunity, he said, "Mike, look, I ran on the theme of Change Maryland." He said we have 24 cabinet departments, economic development, commerce. That is really the one that we got to get it right.
Okay.
Because I ran on the fact that we could do things better, we could do things differently. You know, there was a commission that Norm Augustine headed up to go and look at Maryland. He'd spent all of 2014 doing that. They wrote a report. The report said Maryland is a very unfriendly place for business. The report said Maryland has tried to live off of federal government jobs as opposed to growing all the existing sectors, great sectors. So what we've tried to do, Bob, from day one, is to change the culture, flip the story of Maryland being unfriendly for business. You know, we've done it by creating a department of what I call the culture of yes. Everyone's a customer.
Right. And the slogan is Maryland's open for business, right?
Maryland open for business. When I was day 2 on the job and speaking to a group of business people, and the light bulb that went off was the fact that, and I just had read an article that said there were about 450,000 businesses in Maryland, ranging in size from a handful of folks to McCormick, to Lockheed, to all the others. And the light bulb was they're all customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you come at it from a standpoint of you're a customer, how can we help you?
Right.
It's amazing how quickly you can make progress.
Right.
So it sounds simple, but it's been a big...
Well, I think, Mike, it's that servant leadership. I think so many leaders, you know, Lee Iacocca wrote a great book a number of years ago, and Iacocca's always been one of my, I'm a big fan of Iacocca, but where have all the leaders gone? I think one of the things, and Bob, you can speak to this about it from an educational perspective, I think a lot of times in leadership we forget that we have to be of service to our constituents, to our customers, to Mike, the small business people in Maryland. Our job as elected or appointed officials is to really service these people. So, Mike, I couldn't agree with you more. So we got a couple minutes here, and this is going to fly by tonight. We're going to come back and we'll pick up on this. But I want to hear, Mike, from you, like what changes. And it sounds like to me, listen, we've had Democratic governors for a long time. We've been doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And was it Einstein who said that's a definition of insanity?
No, there was another philosopher.
There was another philosopher. Okay, it wasn't Michael Jordan, right? But there's so many things. But Mike, what we want to hear about when we come back on the other side of the break a little bit is some of the specific things that we've done. We've got a long way to go. I mean, we've got a long way. And one of the things I say is, the success of Baltimore, there goes the state of Maryland, because even though Annapolis is the capital of the state of Maryland, Baltimore is essentially the crown jewel. And if Baltimore fails,
we got to get it right.
We got to get it right, Mike. We got to get it right. We're not doing that. One of the things I say, and my listeners know, that we talk about two things, and I'm out and about all the time. A city needs to be safe and clean. Look at Rudy Giuliani did, and look at Michael Bloomberg did in the state of New York that's got about 10 million people. safe and clean. It's that perception. If it's not safe, it's not clean. People lose hope, then despair sets in shortly after that. So we've got to change that entire environment. Folks, you're listening to the Bob Paff Show on WCBM 680 AM. Give us a call. You want to speak to the Secretary of Commerce, Mike Gill. You want to speak to the Chancellor of the University of Maryland, Bob Corrett. Give us a call. Talk to us about what's your issues here. We're here on the Bob Paff Show. Give us a call. We'll be back in just a little bit.
It was Albert Einstein.
What's that?
It was Albert Einstein.
It was Einstein?
Yeah, and also, just look this up, Maryland small businesses employ 50.2% of the private workforce.
52% of the workforce? 50.2. There you go, Mike.
Yeah, but you know, a lot of it's a matter of definition. Federal government has a definition of small business. States have a definition of small business. Federal government actually says 500 employees or less are small businesses. And if you look at that, then about 92 to 94%.
Ed Hale Jr. is tuning in. Everybody says hello to Ed Hale Jr., right?
Hey,
Here we go. Eddie! All right. How do you guys want to pick this up? We can talk about work ethic. I mean, Mike, you want to talk about the GM closing? What's going on now with the plant and how that's impacting the state of Maryland with the GM closing and 13,000 people losing jobs? You want to touch on that? I don't want to throw you anything that you don't really want to. No?
No, we don't want to lose one job. In the case of Maryland, it'll be 300 jobs.
We'll come to that.
250.
So can we talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a very big issue in Maryland, but it got a lot of publicity. We can talk about it.
Folks, you're back here with the Bob Paff Show. Again, our guests in the studio are Maryland Secretary of Commerce Mike Gill and the Chancellor of the University of Maryland, Bob Corrett. Bob was appointed chairman in 2015, the same year that Mike Gill was appointed the Commerce Secretary. Hey, Mike, one of the things I got to ask you.
That was a big year for Maryland.
That was a big year for Maryland.
Are you kidding me?
You know, I got to ask you this. You're going to stick around for another 4 years? You're going to see this thing through? I'm sure that you got an agenda, right? Tell us a little bit about that agenda, Mike. What do you want to be accomplished? What do you want to accomplish? When you came into the office, what things did you either promise the governor? Listen, you're a businessman. I've got it listed here of all the things that you have done. Director of Data Systems at Mid-Atlantic for Ernst & Young, founder of Hoyt Capital, founder of First Capital. You and I go way back, right? So what are some of the things that you'd like to see accomplished, Mike, under your time as Secretary of Commerce?
Well, first of all, Bob, I think the thing that I felt so good about, we've got a team of 200 at Commerce. I refer to them all as pirates, and I kid them all the time. Bob, I kid them all the time. I'll say, look, you can lie, cheat, steal, and I may have to reprimand you. But if you ever start acting like government bureaucrats, it's instant separation. So we've continued to work on creating an environment of where businesses feel like they have us, where we're at their back and not in their face.
Okay.
The other thing we've worked hard at, and it's always been there, and you'll appreciate this because you're a Marylander. And Bob, my buddy Bob, he's been here. I mean, heck, how old were you? How old were you when you got
43
to
years, Bob.
You were still in your 20s. He was 27 years old when he got to Towson University.
Wow.
So he's lived.
Okay.
He's lived the longest part of his life in the state of Maryland. But the thing that we've really accelerated on is we always have had great assets. They weren't recognized by previous administrations. I mean, you've heard some of the numbers.
Right.
Not too long ago, 45% of Marylanders said they'd like to live somewhere else. A lot of businesses were leaving Maryland. It wasn't a good situation. The net increase of new jobs was about zero. In the last 4 years, we've added about 130,000 new jobs. But these great assets that we've always had, aerospace, cyber, life sciences.
Medicine, right? I mean, take medicine and education.
All things healthcare.
Right, all things healthcare.
In the case of cyber, we refer to ourselves as the cyber capital of the world, and we can make that argument. In the case of life sciences, the business case that we can make is that we're number 3. San Francisco, Boston, and San Francisco are at another level from us. But
right.
We're closing the gap. So, and then of course higher ed. You know, Bob being the czar of higher education in our state of Maryland. We got great institutions. So,
Bob, how do we blend? That's it, Mike. That's a great pivot. Bob, talk to us a little bit how, because we were talking a little bit, we were off the air, and we got about 2 minutes left, and we'll come back to it. But I want to know what your plans are, what your vision is. How do we blend this too? How do we take the workforce that Mike's talking about? You know, we've got students that are saddled with $1.5 trillion worth of debt. We've got a graduation rate of about 60%. How do we prepare these students to go into Mike's workforce and to give back and to be prepared? And how do you blend those two together? How do you guys work together to accomplish that, Bob?
Let me start by saying that universities have three primary missions, and we have a research mission that ties to a commercialization mission in terms of new company formation and new product formation, and we have the educational mission, which particularly links itself in the case of what Mike's talking about in terms of workforce, and then we have a role in terms of sort of the quality of life, the social well-being of the region. But let me focus for a minute on economic development, because that's what Mike's been talking about. We have 173,000 students in our 12 campuses, and we graduate 40,000 students a year, and 80% of those students that come from Maryland, and 80% of the graduates eventually stay in Maryland. So we really do have an impact in terms of every sector Mike's been talking about, life sciences.
80% stay right here in Maryland after they graduate. That's huge.
That's a really big
That's a big number.
That's about 25,000 new Marylanders every year.
Now, is that typical? Are those numbers available if college graduates stay where they are? That seems like a very high number.
It is very typical, actually, for public universities, and it's really part of our big role, because nobody comes close to having that kind of impact in terms of workforce. And then in terms of company formation, working with Mike and the governor, we're now spinning off about 100, 110 new companies a year, and many of them are maturing. And what the next challenge is to keep them here. Once you've hatched them, once they've begun.
That's right.
There,
Give them reason to stay. Make it easy for them to stay and do business, Mike.
And the thing that we know it, we are the state
Right.
of innovation. It's every time any folks do rankings, we're always up there in the top 3, 4, 5.
That's right.
Against all the big guys, the ones that we usually think of, like Massachusetts, like a California,
That's right.
like a Texas,
Right.
like a Virginia, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Good old Maryland is always
Right
at
up there.
top of the list.
Guys, we're going to come right back. I want to come back on that point. We've got to take another break here. Folks, give us a call, 410-922-6680. You're listening to the Bob Paff Show on WCBM. We will be right back.
10.4% of college graduates move out of
Say that again?
Only 10.4% of college graduates move out of the state after graduating from a university. And the majority of them go to a university in their own original state.
Well, like even the out-of-state students, the vast majority stay here.
Yeah.
Our numbers tell us that about 2/3 stay forever. And that's pretty impressive, actually. We have over, as a system, we have about 500,000 plus alums just in the state of Maryland.
You know where we're doing a good job? We're doing a great job, and I'm talking about Bob's the system of Maryland and higher ed. We're doing a great job in getting really good alignment between the programmatic stuff that goes on at those 12 institutions, preparing kids who can get great jobs in cyber, preparing kids in the healthcare space, preparing kids who financial services. We need accountants. We need all. Healthcare. Healthcare is they're all challenging. Healthcare is a tough one because nursing's big programs, but having said that, it's hard to keep up. It's really hard to keep up. But by and large, we have good alignment. Bob didn't like the good old days where too many kids were majored in German. We only needed 3 of them.
My son's got a PhD in philosophy.
Well, we need 2 of those.
Well, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about areas we can improve, because there's always you can always improve. I'd also like to talk about technology and how we're really replacing a lot of jobs. I've seen some of the numbers. I'm a big fan of this Nebraska Senator Ben Sass. I don't know if he's written 2 terrific books. I heard him speak at the National Press Club, got him to sign my books. I was in the VIP room with him. He's an impressive guy. He's got a PhD in American history. He was one of the youngest college presidents around. And he's a sharp guy. But I love his historical perspective on where we're going. And this book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other, is because we've become less connected, Bob.
Yeah.
The communities are breaking down.
Absolutely. We're trying to reinstill in the curriculum. We try to put out a broad-based graduate with traditional art and science-based foundations. And part of that is your role in society, and your connectivity to others.
Right.
Your civic responsibility. And that
Right.
has deteriorated a great deal.
It has.
And we're really working hard to try to do our part as a part of that quality of life piece to change.
Can we talk about that? You okay with talking about that?
More carefree? Do you have too much to do in too little time?
We're trying to get my interns are working hard to get Ben Sass on the show. I chatted with him and his assistant, and I want to get him.
How cool would that be?
I want to get him on the
I
show.
want to start reading more about Ben Sass.
He is Mike. I'm telling you, both these books and the way he writes, and he recorded. I recorded mine. I went on to Audible because I do voiceover stuff, but Ben recorded his, and just
How does he handle the whole Trump thing, man?
I mean, he stood up against Trump. He's a Republican, but you know what's so nice? He walked into that VIP lounge and walked over to me and said, "Hi, I'm Ben." I mean, he's just like he's real, and he didn't walk in with this with his posse and with this pretense and anything about him. I gave him a copy of my book, and I signed it, Sass for President in 2020. And he said to me, Mike, he said, "I'm going to scratch that out," because he's got 3 kids, and he and his wife, when he got elected, he said, "We'll give it 6 years in the Senate, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do."
In his first term?
He's in his first term. Yeah, 2015.
Yeah.
But if you read the book, I mean, his father was a coach in Nebraska in the same small town. He goes back and forth. He commutes back and forth.
Mid-40s.
He's 46.
46.
He's 46, but he is
Is he tall?
not. He's average height. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's maybe pushing 6 feet tall.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw him on a show the other day, and I thought, what a thoughtful guy.
First time I saw him was on Face the Nation with John Dickerson, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And then I went and I found him on Amazon. I bought the books immediately, and then the thing came up in the National Press Club, and then I scored a VIP. So.
Not here. You can talk around the clock. Stay connected and informed on Talk Radio 680, WCBM, and WCBM.com.
Here we go.
And now more of the Bob Paff Show on Talk Radio 680
Hey folks, you're back with the Bob Paff Show. Thank you so much for coming back. We are so excited. Mike, I've been so since day one to have you on the show, and then I ran into you at a local watering hole or dining hall or whatever we want to say, and
Bob and I were hanging
you
out.
guys
weren't
were hanging out, and you were kind enough, and Bob was kind enough to accept my invitation on the show. I want to talk to the Chancellor because when we were off the air, we were talking about issues like quality of life, and I got to tell you, Bob, as a father of 6, as a father who has 2 in their 30s, 2 in their 20s, and 2 teenagers, I'm really concerned. I'm a big fan of this freshman senator from Nebraska, Ben Sass, and I was just telling Mike, I'm reading his book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other, and How We've Been Disconnected. I'd like to know, and love for you to share with our listeners, Bob, what are the colleges and the universities? Are you aware of these issues, and what kind of things can you do to mediate that?
Yeah, we're absolutely aware of them, and you know, as we were talking about off air, you know, the strength of the American system of higher education, as opposed to what happens in many other countries, is we give you technical skills. I'm a chemist by training.
Okay.
I came up with a lot of skills in chemistry, but we provide you with a really broad-based education, which gives you a sense of history, gives you a sense of perspective in terms of how you fit in that history, how the various disciplines are hooked together. And importantly, what I like to say, the concept of the we versus the me. That
Right.
You're part of something beyond yourself. You're part
That's
of
right.
society. And because of, in many ways, when we opened up the doors to higher ed back, 400 years ago in this country, you had just the elite going to college. You
Right.
had the clergy and the aristocracy, and they recognized they were going to become the leaders of society, and they recognized that that's the kind of education that you needed. Today, the general education, the way we provide it, is often a potpourri of different courses. You take one from column A, one from column B. The students don't really see how it connects together. And we
Great
don't
point.
necessarily, I wouldn't say across the board, I think a lot of people do this well, but connecting those together to give that kind of a person that comes out that has that kind of perspective. So we've reinstituted through actually my board of regents, that the board that I report to, asked us to look at how we could do a better job on that educational piece, and we have a work group that's looking at getting students more involved in voting and voting issues, getting the curriculum more thematically involved with this, we versus the me, the traditional role of democracy, that we are a group together that are trying to do things together for and with each other. And I think that's what we need to do is not only provide the opportunity, but help guide the students into that kind of education by explaining to them as they're coming in, maybe at the high school level, why it's so important. As a chemist, all I wanted to take was chemistry and math.
Right.
It's all the other skills that
That's
allow
right.
me to evolve as life passes.
What I've done some reading that as we evolve, we talked about us replacing ourselves. That things like emotional intelligence, things that have been historically considered the soft disciplines, will come more into play.
Right.
And one of the things that concerns me, Bob, I got to tell you as a father, is I made a note here. I don't know if you've read Charles Murray's book Coming Apart, and he talks about the elite, the educational elite, the social elite, and the economic elite, how they're really running things. And one of the concerns that I would have, I've got a son who's going to the Ivy League, and one of the things I've said to him, you've been blessed. I didn't have those blessings. I went to Lake Clifton. I grew up in the inner city. I didn't have that. I said, son, you've got a responsibility to bless people going forward. I'm concerned, Bob, about the continuation to funnel these kids into that elite, because I think we need to spend more time giving back. We need a greater sense of community, and that's what we've lost. So the gap, and Murray talks about it in this book, is just becoming wider. It's a huge concern.
Well, one of the positives with the millennials, and I have 4 of them, and Gen Z, is that they are actually very interested in giving back. They're not particularly inclined to involve themselves in organized politics.
Okay.
They're not particularly inclined to involve themselves in organized religion.
Yeah.
But they are very, very keen to involve themselves in helping each other. And I think that's a really good sign going forward, and we want to build on that. So I think, each of us has a role. The educators have a role, but the students have a role, and together, hopefully, we can figure out a way to make this even more better.
Well, and Mike, I think it's one of the things that we need to do. We talked about Baltimore City. I'm sorry, guys, having been born there and still living there and raising my kids there and watching it deteriorate. And I got to tell you, I've gone publicly and I've said this mayor is a disaster. Some days I just wish she would resign. I mean, I think she's a deer in the headlights, and it scares me. Again, I'll go back to Tom Peters, who I love, and Peters talked about management by walking around. You cannot govern and you cannot rule from an ivory tower. You've got to get out in the streets. I was in Curtis Bay today, and guess what? I'm going to find a videographer. We're going to do a documentary on, take the streets back. There are ways you can take the streets back. And folks, no, I'm not running for mayor. I appreciate your support, and you're asking me to do that. I'm not going to do it. We'll be right back in just a little bit. We've got the Chancellor of the University of Maryland, Bob Corrett. We've got Mike Gill, the Secretary of Commerce. This is a terrific show, and I'm so grateful for you guys being here, grateful for our sponsors. You're listening to the Bob Paff Show. We'll be back in just a little bit.
Bob, I would, and you probably don't need any encouragement. And as it relates to Baltimore,
Yeah.
we can, our positions really don't allow us to publicly
You're in a tough spot.
comment on Baltimore.
Oh, I know that. But
Comment on Baltimore from a standpoint of,
and I don't want to pull you guys into that, but I can.
leadership. and
Sure.
all
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
above.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you in your role.
Yeah.
Because you've become a public persona and you have a voice, is continue to do your homework. Continue to
Right.
to call it out.
Yeah.
Call it as you see it.
And that's what I'm doing, Mike.
Because we're making zero progress.
Right.
We're making less than zero.
What I'd
And
like
the
to-
atti- and the attitude's incredible. The negative attitude.
Oh, yeah.
And I hear it everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It's beyond just.
Well, I had Kevin Davis in here 2 weeks ago. I devoted the whole show to Kevin.
I'm very close friends. with
Right.
him. Yeah.
We did the whole show with Kevin. I had TJ Smith calling in one day, so
But for you personally, in your role,
Yes.
continue to.
and that's what I'm going to do. And you know what I think, guys? I got a lot of street cred because I grew up there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's not like I'm from Philadelphia, which this mayor is. I mean, I've got skin in the game,
Yeah. Lake Clifton kids are allowed to talk about it.
right? I think so, Mike. I mean, really, we joke about that, but Lake Clifton kids are
We have, and again,
right, Karen? I mean, her mom grew up in my neighborhood.
Right around that neighborhood.
Right around that
So,
neighborhood, Mike.
I wouldn't do that now.
Lake Clifton area.
Yeah.
Clifton Park.
Yeah.
I was between Herring Run and Clifton Park. It's my grandmother.
My mother died on Kenyon Avenue in 2005. So
Yeah, my grandmother passed Pelham Avenue.
Pelham,
In 2003.
2 blocks away from me.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember. I know Pelham.
we've launched an initiative to try to just get more of the traditional age high school graduates, more of them to stay in school so they graduate
Yeah.
and go to some form of post-secondary training,
Yeah.
whether it's apprenticeship programs or community college or a four-year university, because the percentages of students dropping out or going on, graduating or going on, is way below the state average. And these young people, unless you can give them skills or an employment,
Right.
something that
That's
allows
right.
them to get a job, you're never going to change the city. right?
That's right.
So, and so we are working hard on, I call it B-Power, where we're trying to just, and I met with Morgan, for example, to ensure them that, I don't care if all these kids go to Morgan State, as
Right.
opposed to the system. That's
Right.
not the point.
Right.
The point is we want them to go someplace.
That's right.
And so we're working together with Morgan, with Coppin, with BCCC, and with UB in particular,
Yeah.
on that particular initiative. The University of Baltimore, which is an upper division, is mostly graduate, has done a huge amount on the west side, and Hopkins has done a great amount on the east side. There are lots of pieces, but it's
Well, finally, Hopkins has done it. I was born on Duncan Street next to there's. It took forever. And when I go after Hopkins, and I say that, my ex had 2 stints at Hopkins, and I was born on Duncan Street right next to the market. It took them forever to do anything there. It really did. And I think part of it, the leadership came in from wherever they did, and they were in the Ivory Tower, and they didn't have a sense of what that community's like. I remember running through Bocheck Park being chased by a gang of kids, and I had to get my little butt home, or I was going to get it beaten up.
Bocheck, I played baseball.
Right?
Bocheck.
Right? See that, Mike?
I played a lot of baseball at Clifton Park.
Did you? Oh, yeah.
City didn't have a baseball field, so their home field was
Okay.
Clifton Park.
What's like Catholic High? Catholic High, it's Harrywan Park because they don't have a field there.
Yeah.
My daughter just had a field hockey game there, and so it was at Clifton. It was at Harrywan Park. All
Do
right.
you have any athletic fields at Bryn Mawr?
We do. We do.
my daughter went to Roland Park Country.
But like I
Same
almost
deal,
went
right?
to Catholic High. That was the next school I almost went to.
That's right, because your mom's a teacher. Her mom's a teacher in the city, right? Where's your mom
no,
teach?
my mom's an archdiocesan teacher.
Oh.
But my sister's going to go to Catholic High. And
Okay.
like all that.
Where in the Archdiocese does your...
My mom teaches Immaculate Conception.
Oh, in Towson.
Yeah.
Got it.
One of our close friends is the chancellor of the Archdiocese School System.
Yeah.
Jim Selinger, great guy.
I see Jim in church all the time. I've invited the Archbishop on the show because I'm going to have the keeper. I'm doing a show on the keepers
By
on
the way,
December.
Jim and the Archbishop would be good guys to have on the show.
I've invited because I've spoken to Father Lou because, I'm a member of the cathedral.
Yeah.
And I've
Father
been...
Lou's his right-hand guy.
Yeah, he is, and
Keep
I've
it
spoken to
safe.
Father Lou. I want to get they want to be transparent. I'm giving them the opportunity because I'm going to have the 2 original plaintiffs from the Keepers on my show on December 14th.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that.
Ooh.
So in fairness, because the Archbishop said he wants to be transparent, you guys can see I'm not going to gang up on him. I'm not, I'm giving him an opportunity to say, here's what we're going to do, right? Bob, and I think he'd be crazy not to take the opportunity, and I told Father Lou that.
You're right.
And I don't want him coming. I know all the guys at Gallagher, Vilas, and Jones. I don't want to come in here and have him lawyer up, and I want him to come in here. If I say anything that offends him, he can walk out. But I think he needs to come in. I really do.
Why do I need it to text me when it's done? Okay.
All right, Mike, can we go to you?
Yeah, we're at Starwood's 500 million.
We set? Here we go, guys. Mike, I'm going to go back to you. Where can we improve? You can always improve. So we can flip that to both you guys.
And now more of the Bob Paff Show on Talk Radio 680 WCBM and worldwide at WCBM.com.
Hey folks, Bob Paff here. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me give you those call-in numbers again. 410-922-6680. We're not always able to take your calls, and I got to tell you, honestly, when we get such great, stimulating guests in the studio that I have tonight, there's a lot of things that I want to cover here. We could have these guys back. We just don't have the airtime to do it all, but I want to give you those numbers. 410-922-6680 and then 800-922-6680. Give us a call, and if you've got a question for the Chancellor or you've got a question for the Secretary of Commerce, now is your time to ask them. Now, Mike, I'm going to flip it to you because everything is not always perfect. I think that I'm a huge, I know, believe it or not,
Now you tell me.
I'm a huge Larry Hogan fan. And I think he's done a terrific job. And I tell you what I love about him. I love the fact, I heard somebody say this, and you'll know this person, I'm not going to share his name, but I've heard, in comparison to maybe other governors, that he arrives early and he stays late. He wants to make sure if somebody wants to meet him or if somebody wants to talk to him, he wants to be there. And that's what that's the sense you get from this governor that I really like about him, Mike, is that he really cares about other people. He cares about what he's doing, and he wants to listen to people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I knew the Gov to say hello to before I came into this position. He had been Bob Ehrlich's appointment secretary.
And I'd forgotten about that, yes.
Yep, he had been Bob's appointment secretary, so we got to know each other a bit because in 2004, Bob appointed me to the Board of Regents. So that was really when I first interfaced with the Gov. And but what you just said, he has a sense of urgency about things. He has great instincts. we've all observed the fact, and it's been his strength, and that is he doesn't take on things for the sake of taking on battles.
Okay.
He's not a, I don't care if I lose the war. I really want to get in there,
Right, get in there and
fight it out for something that it's a waste of time.
right.
He's very practical. I've said often that if he were a golfer, and I don't even think he owns golf clubs, but if he were,
There's two of us.
But if he were, he wouldn't hit the ball long.
Right.
But he wouldn't go looking for it under trees and in creeks and in deep rough. He'd have the ball somewhere in play, and he would be very efficient in the way he plays his game. But he's all about service. He's all about customer, and I think that's it was part of our culture to begin with. Larry and I really just hit it off right away. When I went down to meet with him and he offered me the opportunity, he was in his transition office in Annapolis. I took down a copy of my favorite book and I had autographed it for him.
What's your favorite book, Mike? Can you share that with us?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's probably the greatest book ever written. It was written in 1929. It was written by Waddy Piper. It's an easy read. It's got great pictures, great story. It was called The Little Engine That Could.
The little.
And if anybody thinks there's a
I was
better
thinking The
book,
Giving Tree. That's a great one too. The Giving Tree.
call in if you think there's a better book than Little Engine.
The Little Engine.
But again, I think that we've working closely with the Gov. He's all into the business. He and I have worked so closely on some of these big deals like Marriott Corporation, McCormick, Northrop Grumman.
Yeah.
All the industry sectors. We have an initiative called Excel Maryland, where we're looking at where the governor can apply additional resources to initially life sciences, cyberspace. We already have a lot of great programs, but we want to double down because these are industry sectors that represent a lot of great quality jobs. It makes us a leader. So the governor's been right in the middle of Excel Maryland and how we can enhance the programs. So I anticipate this coming legislative session and the budget, the governor's going to look to do some things that are going to enhance our already strong position.
So, Mike, it's a great pivot. So, what are some of those positions? Where are the areas? And Bob, I want you to talk about this too. What else do we need to do? Where can we? Because you can always have improvement. Nothing's ever a finished product. So, Mike, I'll talk to you, and then Bob, if you can chime in on the educational side. Where can we improve in the state of Maryland, Mike? Is in the small business area? I mean, the red tape. I know Governor Hogan's cut through a lot of that. He's lowered fees for people. But where are some of the areas, Mike, that we can improve, particularly if you're a small business owner out there?
Yeah, let me give you a couple thoughts on that. The first one, which we've made a great deal of progress. When I came into the opportunity, Bob, a lot of people would say, well, we need to bring in some really big companies. And I'd say, well, that's true, but what we really need to do is make sure the ones that are here don't leave, because the real key to success in growing your customers is retention.
Right.
So I think we've done. It's not unlike Bob's world relative to the 173,000 students. I mean, if you have effective advising programs, if the kids are matched up correctly with proper majors, and they know what the expectations are, the retention is going to be much, much higher. So retention is always going to be a big part of it. As far as the small business community, here's the thing I say about the small businesses. One of the real important aspects of the large companies in Maryland is the incredible number of small businesses that are created through the large enterprises. The best example that I was with them all about half a day earlier last week, Northrop Grumman. They have 13,000 employees in the state of Maryland. They spend about $900 million inside the state of Maryland in buying goods and services from almost 1,000 businesses, most of which are small businesses. So I think one of the things that we got to continue to work on is our interaction with the small businesses, being responsive. We have 800 numbers. We have great websites. There's a lot of things we do in that regard.
Yeah, let me jump in. I think
Please.
from a higher ed perspective.
Absolutely.
Two things. One on the education side, one on the research economic development side. On the education side, I do think we need to keep working, and this state is one of the best in the nation at doing this, but keeping the cost of the education down for the students. We talked about this off air also. Student debt is too high. Half of my students graduate with no debt, but the other half have, just under $30,000 a year in debt. and we need to figure out a way to continue to make that get to be a smaller and smaller number. And part of doing that is to get students through more quickly, and to get a higher percentage of them through, because a lot of the debt accumulates because they're taking, instead of 4 years, they're taking
I
5
see.
and 6 and 7 years. On the research side, I co-chaired this initiative that Mike mentioned called Excel Maryland with the president of Johns Hopkins, Ron Daniels. And one of the things we need to do there in terms of new company formation, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, is in keeping them in town, is to provide the kind of resource base we need, especially when they're first launching, to keep them here, help them be here. Series A money, Series B money, a lot more venture money in the state would be very, very helpful. We have to get to a critical mass so that more and more and more of these companies want to be here,
Yeah.
want to stay here. And I think those are two of the things that we can do a lot better than we have, although we are one of the best educated states in the country.
One of the things I'd like to talk to you about, Bob, and we'll come back on the other side of this break, is, New York has been a big proponent of free tuitions, some medical school and some other things. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because there's you got to weigh in on that economically, the advantages and the disadvantages, because nothing is a panacea. Yeah. Nothing's going to be perfect. But, $1.5 trillion worth of debt when these kids are getting out, and if the graduation rate continues to fall, and then preparing the students for the change in technology we talked about as well. We're going to be replacing a lot of these jobs, and more emphasis on the soft skills, the emotional intelligence, the communication skills. I was glad to hear that, Mike, because you look at my book, Communicating to Win, that there's going to be more emphasis, and I don't see a lot of that historically. I got to tell you, and I see it sometimes in my own family. We've gotten away from the basics of communication. Technology, and I've been saying this for years, the three guys who are now billionaires, one's deceased, we're basically affectionately three geeks who discovered all these things in their garages or their basements, but it's changed the world. Mm-hmm. It's changed the world, and that change hasn't all been for the good. So in a lot of ways, we talked about being disconnected. So folks, we're going to be back, and we'll wrap this up in just a little bit. You're listening to the Bob Paff Show. We've got Secretary of Commerce Mike Gill, and we've got the Chancellor of the University of Maryland, Bob Corrett, on here with us. It's a terrific show. Stay tuned. Give us a call, 410-922-6680. You're listening to the Bob Paff Show on WCBN.
Yeah, I just did a piece on one of my friends is the president of Northeastern, a guy named Joseph Alun, and one of his books, most recent book, is called Robot Proof, the kind of education you need in the age of the robots, when artificial intelligence, machine learning is hardware and software.
Yeah.
Is sort of taking jobs away from everybody.
Yeah.
Driverless trucks and cars. What kind of education guarantees you'll still be employed?
Right.
And there are a number of things. There's another book called The Rise of the Robots, and they sort of overlap a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is a huge part of the future. If you look, I just was looking at a chart, the difference between somebody without a high school degree and a college degree in the 40s had a difference in income, lifetime income of maybe $300,000.
My mom needs one.
Today, no college versus college, it's triple that.
Yeah.
And it's just going to get worse. And so, you just need.
We back? Here we go, guys. Can we pick up on that? What we were talking about? What was that we were...
Is that what it is?
Hey folks, Bob Paff here, back with you. We've got the Secretary of Commerce of the state of Maryland. This is your chance. You can talk to the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Maryland, Mike Gill. You can talk to the Chancellor of the University of Maryland system. You've got questions about education. You've got questions about commerce and small business. And Elizabeth, what were the numbers? 50.2%. 50% of small businesses in Maryland. Small business is the backbone of the economy. It always has been. So we got these people out there that are putting it out on the line all the time. One of the things that we were talking about, we talked about at the break, and Bob, I'd like to pick up on with you. I'm going to talk to you about the concerns we have about replacing ourselves with technology. How do you, running an academic empire, let's call it what it is, how do you prepare these students for those changes in technology? And what do you see, Bob, as a chemist, looking at it from a very analytical perspective, but also, the changes that are going on, and how do we adapt to this?
Well, I do think, and this has been going on for 30 years. There's a book that goes back into the 80s that is called The End of Work. And it talks about how hardware and software and artificial intelligence are going to replace all human beings. And there have been a huge number of books, Industries of the Future,
Yes.
Rise of the Robots, Robot Proof, all of which sort of take you in that same direction. And I have no doubt that as technology continues to become more and more sophisticated, AI, big data, all of these things are here today and are beginning to work, that we're going to see fewer and fewer jobs in many ways in traditional sectors. So one of the issues that comes out of that dialogue is if you're not working, what do you do, and how do you earn a living?
Right.
And some of these books, one of them will say, well, you all become volunteers. We all do volunteerism. I'm not sure that's motivational.
Right.
Another one will say that to earn a living, the government will give you basically Social Security from the day you're born, right? So a guaranteed family income.
Fascinating.
Then I say, well, who's paying the taxes to generate that income?
That's right.
To give you that if nobody's working. So I like the idea. I do believe that every time technology has improved, we actually haven't lost jobs. We've just changed jobs.
Right.
And the idea that, and this comes out of the Robot Proof book, of really having skills that you have to be digitally qualified. I mean, everybody has to have a digital backbone today, and it's going to get more and more. You have to be able to work with the technology. But the other two areas are areas where human beings work together. Human contact, i.e. the social work and health professionals, they're going to be around for a long, long time. Robots aren't going to take over all of that. And then you're going to have people in the creative arts and in the creative sector. But the technology sector is going to be the biggest because all of this technology has to be run, maintained,
True.
programmed, updated on a regular basis by people who are digitally qualified.
And Bob, could I add this real
Absolutely.
quick? One of the pillars in the Kerwin Commission, and I like it. I like it a lot. And that is, we're going to try to develop more structure, more process, more thoughtfulness as a child enters the high school years and their competency, and whether or not that child needs to go down a different path than a traditional 4-year path, because we're still stuck
Yeah.
into the 4-year.
That's right, we are.
College prep sort
And
of
it's not
thing.
for everybody. Is it a 4-year? Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's too dysfunctional. It's too unstructured in terms of a child that shouldn't be going in that direction. But we really don't have a program.
It's a great point, Mike.
So I think in that regard, for example, I was at Cowan Systems not too long ago. They have 2,000 plus trucks throughout the United States. They are constantly down about 15% on drivers. They make $80,000 a year. They're drivers.
Wow.
But it seems like that is one of the
Is
things.
part of the issue that people don't want to do those things anymore? Because we talked about, my first job was setting up bowling pins in a church in Highlandtown. I made $3 a night, and it's a funny story, and it'll probably take us to the break. Listen to this. There were 3 lanes, Sacred Heart Church on Conkling Street. 3 lanes, 3 12-year-old boys. It meant that one of those 12-year-old boys had to die, had to get fired, or had to move away. Chances weren't very high.
Right.
There was an opening. I took it. At the end of the night, guys, I would get $1, $2, $3, Mike, 3 singles. We'd walk across Conkling Street to the little tavern or the White Town, whatever it's called, and we'd buy a bag of hamburgers, and you got change.
Right.
And I was excited, man.
Sounds like Little Tavern.
People don't want to do those jobs anymore, though. Mike, you just talked about $80,000 a year to drive a
What
truck.
do we call them? Death burgers?
But Bob, a 4-year college education or degree is not for everyone, and we got to make it okay, though.
No, we need to expose the kids whose path should not really be a.
It shouldn't be that, and it's got to be okay, Mike.
Two opportunities in the
Right?
marketplace.
Well, what Kerwin Commission is looking at is really taking what we call career and technology, a CTE education,
Yeah.
and really having kids look at which paths work for them, but then having crossovers depending on where they go in life
Yeah.
if they want to come back into a different.
I say it all the time. I do a lot of work around suicide prevention, and I look at 18,000 murders in 2016 versus 46,000 suicides. We need to take the stigma off of mental illness.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of thing. It's okay if you're not going to college. It doesn't make you less of a person. We're going to be right back. I know we're running out of time. You're listening to the Bob Paff Show on WCBM. We'll be right back.
I chair what's called the Mary Christie Foundation, which is totally focused on decreasing suicide in the college.
Oh, it is, because out of my 6 children, one of them has struggled with this in his first attempt when he was 13 years old.
Yeah, and one of our close friends, Doug Strauss, lost a daughter to suicide.
Did he really?
Yeah, she was a year behind our daughter Allie at Notre Dame Prep.
She was a freshman.
She was a
at NYU.
freshman at NYU. Her parents knew that she was, struggling to get acclimated to NYU, and they.
In the state of New York, not to interrupt you, between the ages of 10 and 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death.
And she was a freshman.
We have in our counseling centers 45 to 55,000 visits a year.
Do you really, Bob?
Now, some of those are multiple. There's probably, again, some of the students are that are, you know, in most need are using
Yeah.
multiple visits.
Yes.
But we don't put anybody in maintenance in our counseling centers. You can have like 6 visits, and then we shift you off to a
Okay.
community, because we're not structured to,
Yeah.
maintain you. But
Mike, we just did a program. It's called More Than Sad at Boys Latin because I've got Henry Smythe who's this is my personal mission. I'm going to get a program into every school. And so Chris Post, who's at BL, and Henry Smythe at Gilman, I said something to Henry. I said, he said, I'm in. I'll do it. And I brought the people down from New York. The AFSP is the largest organization. It started out as research-based, $30 million organization, just providing all of this information. There's no sale to be made there. It's about awareness. We just did the walk out of the darkness for suicide prevention.
by the way, I thought they used to be-
Hear this commercial? This is me on this commercial for suicide prevention.
Like we have the amount of students at my school go to the counselor consistently and then go to therapy and
Yeah.
everything.
It's huge.
It's a huge.
The pressure because of social media, I didn't get the likes, I didn't get the this, I didn't get the that, the bullying, all these things that go on. It's contributing to all that, Bob.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
That's my voice doing that commercial.
Also, we do have,
What's up?
I do programming. I'm like in that. Like if we wanted to talk about technology.
I want to talk to the headmistress at Bryn Mawr and all that too. So we're going to work on that because the sister schools. My daughter started out at RPCS. She's a sophomore at Friends now, but you've got the the tri-school community: Gilman, RPCS, and Bryn Mawr.
Actually, my daughter, she lives in LA now, but she's only been, she landed 20 minutes ago.
Oh, did she?
Is she still taking that
Let me see.
cool guy that you guys really like?
Yeah, he made a wooden Christmas tree. He brought it in all assembled in 2 duffel bags from the plane and checked.
Is he coming with it?
No, not this trip. He was here last time.
He played some college baseball. didn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah. Yep.
We got a minute, and then this will be our last spot. We're going to have about 5 minutes. I want to make sure I get in whatever you guys want to talk about.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, you can't talk about Baltimore City, but what do you guys have on your agenda that?
About football.
You want to talk about football?
Mike wants to talk about Clemson.
No, I'm okay. This is a Baltimore show.
Now I'm going to.
We have a great president.
Want to talk about Towson University, how it's exploding, and what's going on in that whole community?
We have a president that's making it happen. New buildings, energy levels high. Kids are graduating.
Yeah.
Fastest growing school in the system.
Have a wonderful. We still have probably the highest our minority
Mike's a
students.
grad.
Our minorities graduate at a rate equal to the rest of the population at Towson University.
Only
Really?
11 schools in the country where that's true.
Pretty impressive.
You still on the board? I know you were the
No,
chairman of the
no,
board, weren't you?
no.
Okay.
Maybe someday I'll jump back in with Tim
Well, we have an opening.
on the regions.
So let's end on a positive note. Let's talk about what's going out because you're a Tiger, and let's talk about you were the president of Towson. Let's talk about Towson. Let's end on a what's going. Here we go, guys. What's going on in that whole neighborhood?
And now more of the Bob Paff Show on Talk Radio 680 WCBM and worldwide at WCBM.com.
Hey, folks, Bob Paff here. You are back for the last few minutes of this wonderful show with the Secretary of Commerce, Mike Gill, and we've got the Chancellor of the University of Maryland, Bob Corretto, here with us. We're going to talk about, we got a couple Towson Tigers in the room here in the studio, and I want to talk about, I got to tell you, I finished up at Towson, I guess, in 1983. That place has just exploded. And everything that's going on around there, Bob, you had to have been out there, right, at the time when all of that was going on. Talk to us a little bit. And I know Mike was on the board. And Mike, were you the chairman of the Board of Regents or whatever out there at
When
Towson?
I was part of Towson, we referred to it as the Board of Visitors,
The Board of Visitors. Okay.
which is an important part of the structure.
So talk to us about, is Towson going to be like a new Georgetown? I mean, the infrastructure's been there to turn it into a college town, but it's never happened, Bob. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, when I arrived there in '74, they were just under 10,000 students, and now they're approaching 23,000, and
Wow.
soon will be 25,000. And
Is it the fastest growing or one of
in the traditional campuses? Yeah, our online campus is the fastest growing, but Towson is the fastest growing of the traditional campuses, and it it'll max out at about 25,000 on the current site. It's that's all it can handle there, but it's also a campus that's matured in a lot of ways. You've got applied doctorate degrees, you've got huge numbers of master's degrees, you've got a great group of students, the SAT GPA profile, and it's typical of many of the campuses in the system. We serve as sort of anchors in our local communities, And Towson is doing that in the area of Towson. You're seeing College Park do that in the College Park area, Salisbury doing that in the Salisbury area, etc. It's a huge part of our role, and they're each evolving. But watching Towson reach out, I've always believed that the institution needed to reach out into the community more. So you see them.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, expanding into different
Yeah.
parts of the community.
Historically, they haven't done a good job of that, Bob, have they?
No, well, colleges in general, don't like doing that, and neighborhoods don't like it when colleges do
That's
that,
right,
right? And
right.
So you have to find the right places. And when I was there, we did we expanded the radio station and several of our graduate programs up to the north end of Towson near the where the mall is. And now the president is beginning to expand across the street into what is the Towson Row area,
Right.
with the hotel, etc. And all of that's going to be for the betterment. Students love being in college towns. Their parents love having them in college towns. And the more you
It's like an
create them-
incubator. There's a safety
That's
aspect to that, right?
And I'd like to just, Bob, do a shout out to the president, Kim Schatzel.
Absolutely, yeah.
She's probably in the latter part of her second year.
Second year.
Getting ready to go into her third.
Where'd she come to us from?
She came from Central Michigan.
Eastern Michigan.
Eastern Michigan. Okay.
She has a wonderful background, both an academic background and a business background. She's high energy. She's very, very focused. She has the ability to both engage effectively with the campus community and at the same time effectively with the business community. I love what's happening. Bob alluded to it relative to us becoming more integrated into the entire town of Towson. That's a good thing because it allows us to keep growing. I mean, we were landlocked. If our vision was no greater,
That's right.
than Towson Town Boulevard, Osler Drive,
Yeah.
Cross Campus Boulevard, and York Road.
That's right,
we
all
were
right there.
landlocked.
You're pinned in right there. Well, and I think it's good too because Bob, it's got to serve because we are becoming less connected. There's a great opportunity. We got to look at some of these things, as opportunities. I think you've got to look for the silver lining in a lot of these things and take advantage of that and turn these things around. Folks, listen, you've been tuned into the Bob Paff Show. We've had two terrific guests with us. I'm honored and delighted. And
That's an
gentlemen,
unbelievable guest.
thank you so much. So we've had the Secretary of Commerce, Mike Gill, here with us, and Bob Corrett, the Chancellor of the University of Maryland. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'd love to have you again. I'm going to pitch you right here in public, everybody. Folks, we're out of here. So have a great weekend and a great week. This is Bob Paff signing off. We'll talk to you next week on the Bob Paff Show. Take care.
I live 10 minutes away, so anytime you need me.
Thank you,
That was
Bob.
easy,
Thank you
right?
so much.
Karen?
Yeah, I mean,
Fabulous.
Wasn't that fun?
it's one of those things
And it
where-
goes. I mean, the energy.
Well, I'll tell you, having these two gentlemen here who have such synergy,
Right.
I think it was a perfect.
It's so
perfect show.
important.
Yeah.
I had, if you guys can imagine, I had 10 people in here one night with the same amount of time. And one of my friends who's been on the radio for 30 years, she said, "Where's your timer?" And I said, "I don't have a timer." She said, "What do you mean? How do you know?" And I said, "I just do." She's like, "Oh my God." Because it was crazy. I mean, I had the doors open and chairs and this, and I'd go here, and then I'd go, "Karen, what do you think?" And then back, we got a break. I got to thank you. Like, oh.
Mike, I'm going to give you my hat because it matches with your scarf.
I know,
Yes,
I'm
it
just
does. Look at
noticing
that.
Very
Yeah.
close.
I just got a text. Bonnie Fry just got